What do you think of the teams that don't name themselves after the city they're in? They name themselves after the state or the region, like the New England Patriots. Or
Yeah. No,
the
I
Golden
don't.
State
I don't
Warriors.
care for that.
I don't care for that either. I think that sounds. I don't know. They're trying to expand beyond really where they are, and
If it is the only thing that's nearby, then it makes sense. But like the California Angels, like that made no sense.
Los Angeles. You prefer the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim?
Yeah.
Is that better? Would you rather be the California Angels or the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim? They're both terrible, but which one is better?
I think the California Angels makes less sense somehow because there are other teams in California, right?
That's
So
true. That's true.
they're not like
Also,
trying to
they're called
incorporate
the Angels
areas
because they're in
that
Los
are
Angeles, the city of angels.
yeah.
And so I think but then I guess is it because the Dodgers want the sole rights to be called the Los Angeles Dodgers, so they have to be the Anaheim Angels and then the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim because they're pissing off the Anaheim people.
For some reason, I think that the Angels thought that they were getting a bigger market if they had LA in their name.
Yeah,
which doesn't seem like it should matter to anybody there or out of there, except it would just annoy the people of Anaheim, where the team actually is.
And I guess like the Minnesota Vikings, they call themselves Minnesota Vikings because they're Minneapolis St. Paul, but they don't want to irritate the St. Paul people.
Yeah.
They call themselves the Minneapolis Vikings.
Yeah.
Minneapolis Lakers that was the last team I think.
And they moved because of that argument, right?
Yeah. Well, but they kept the Lakers, which is the least. I guess the lake is the Pacific Ocean now, but that's still.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense. Like
Lakers,
Utah Jazz.
Utah Jazz, which makes more sense, the Lakers or the Jazz
They make the same amount of sense.
With the Grizzlies in Memphis, that's not really Vancouver. Yeah, there are Grizzlies up there, but I don't even know if there are maybe some black bears in the wilds of Tennessee or Arkansas, but no Grizzlies, that's for sure. But I guess you could say, well, there aren't any Royals or in Kings or whatever either.
I do like that the Kansas City teams had the theme to them though, right? So
they had the Monarchs and the Kings and the Royals and the Chiefs, and I think that can be okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
Which is kind of like what an issue that Andy Reid's had in the past too, with defenses not being that great and offenses that are maybe too potent, right?
I think that's something to that. I don't know how much there is to that. If that's just a kind of conventional wisdom that doesn't really have real backing to it. But I think you want to have if you have a good offense, you want to have them on the field as much as possible. But
yeah, if you can run up the score. But
I think one of the problems with the Chiefs though is that they sometimes do not run up the score when they could, and it comes back to bite them. And I think that's a problem with I don't know if it's a problem with other NFL teams the same way, because I think Reid is kind of a gentleman in a lot of the ways he conducts business. And the Chiefs, even like that game we talked about, the game against Jimmy Garoppolo. The Chiefs think we're up to 35-0 in that game or something, and then they still kind of, maybe it was, I don't know, it was 35-0, but it was a big lead, and they still kind of let the 49ers crawl back sort of into it enough that Jimmy Garoppolo thought, well, if I make this extra 2 yards, I can hurt. But there is a little bit of letting the proverbial foot off the gas pedal.
Yeah.
And or just like in the playoffs, it was kind of the opposite, where they just kind of weren't doing anything the first couple of series, quarters even, and then they decide, well, let's just
turn it up all the way.
And I don't know how. Again, I'm sure it's not really. It feels like that from an outsider's perspective. I'm sure it's not really like that from actually playing. But
the defense did step up tremendously late in that season and then into the playoffs too. Yeah. Where earlier in the year they were making almost no stops, and then the previous seasons, like the defense hadn't been good, but they'd been great at getting timely turnovers. Yeah. And the 2019 first 3 quarters of the season, they were not getting those turnovers, and they weren't stopping anybody. So until the team finally gelled, and once it clicked, then they were forcing turnovers, and they were getting stops, and the offense was still potent.
Mm-hmm. And Mahomes by that point was also healthy again.
Yeah.
Whereas
it just all came together at the right time.
3 quarters of the season, he was injured in one way or multiple ways.
Yeah.
But still, it took him. while like the playoff games, the offense was not there at the beginning of any of those.
Right. But, it's there. It just wasn't.
Yeah, it wasn't humming.
Wasn't working yet.
They were at their best against the 49ers early in the game because they got off to a lead against them. Whereas they, really didn't do that against the Texans and the Titans not so much either.
But had the correct outcome for what we wanted, so we're happy.
I'm very happy. And I'm thinking they might have a good shot again this year, especially with the lack of cohesion that can be developed by any of the teams with this offseason. And, maybe you think Super Bowl hangover or whatever, but there hasn't been a whole lot of ceremony and pomp since February.
Yeah. Well, and their top players have been rewarded, and Kelsey signed to an extension.
And it's not like they can go out and party all the time right now and get free drinks and things like that because everybody loves them because nobody can go do anything. So I don't think some of those hangover things are going to be literal or figurative hangovers are going to really happen as much.
Yeah. It seems like everyone's motivated to go back out there and repeat the events or trying to top it even. So. And
I guess you say that all the time anyway. You never know. You always think, this team's poised to repeat, and you never know which one is going to have a hangover. But it seems like usually it's not the Super Bowl winning team that has the biggest hangover. It's the Super Bowl losing team that has the hardest time getting back. This happens with Philadelphia, happened with Atlanta. Recently, if it's a team that hasn't been there before, it's a little bit unusual. Like, in baseball with the Royals, when they lost the World Series, they went back the next year and won. That's very unusual. Teams might make back-to-back World Series, but usually they win the first one, and then they either might win or lose the second one. But
the Dodgers recently went back and lost both times.
Back and lost both times. But they're such a good team. But, like in the Super Bowl teams or whatever, usually they don't lose. If they're in there twice, if they lose one of those games, it's the second game that they lose. Like the Packers, they beat the Patriots and then they lost to the Broncos.
Yeah.
And then the Broncos are back-to-back, and they back-to-back winners that next year. Although the Broncos, I guess, were back-to-back losers against – and the Bills, of course, were four-time back-to-back losers. So I guess maybe in football those things are different, but –
because the window is a little different in football than it is in some other sports. Especially, baseball is much more random. And
especially once you get to the playoffs. Yeah.
Like basketball is more prone to dynasty than football is.
Yeah, because it's the best team that in seven basketball games, it's pretty clear to establish which one the best team is. Even 7 baseball games, it's still pretty random because the best baseball team probably only has a 60% chance of beating the worst baseball team.
Right.
And
there's still home and away differences too. So.
Yeah, and like college basketball, it's so wild because it was only one game.
Right.
Whereas NFL is a little bit like that too. There's only one game that separates. Even a 16-game season is always
the games are long enough that the better team tends to win.
Tends to win
in the playoffs, yeah.
But it's not all. But it's not like basketball. I think is the sport that is. Of the major sports is the one that assures most often that the best team is going to win. At least the best team
in a series, at least. In a series, at least.
Is going to win the series. Is going to win the finals. Yeah.
Yeah, in an individual game, it's not so much especially because the way the rules change with the position in the game.
Mm-hmm.
The last 2 minutes, there are essentially different rules than the rest of the game to make it more exciting.
Yeah, and you can argue playoff basketball is very different from regular season basketball, where people are actually caring about it, where they don't really, there's not a whole lot. As long as you get in the playoffs, you don't really care too much about the seeding and stuff. And you want to get a higher seed than a lower seed, but you don't. It's not the end of the world to be a 3 seed if you think you're a better team. Whereas in football and stuff, you get buys and stuff like that. Basketball, you still got to play 7 games no matter what. You might get home field disadvantage, 4-3, but it's
Well, wildcard teams don't necessarily go deep in playoffs and in the NFL,
Hmm.
but in baseball, it's not uncommon for wildcard teams to go to the World
Yeah.
Series like regularly.
Yeah. Yeah, playing a
But,
game is not exhausting physically. It's
right.
a football game is very tiring, and so you play the week before. You have a team that has a week off. Well,
But
usually that.
also the wildcard teams tend to be the teams that like are worked very hard to get into the playoffs
Yeah,
late, and so they're playing their best baseball at that point. Where sometimes the best teams have been
that's true.
not really competing
They've
with
been coasting.
anybody, so they
Yeah,
don't care, and so they're trying to rekindle their spark that got them to that many wins, but
yeah.
then they don't perform well in the playoffs. Like what was it, the Mariners? They won what was it, 116 games the regular
Yeah.
season, and they were out in the first round
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because they just came out flat and then they were out. Yeah. So yeah, that doesn't happen as much in football. I mean, wildcard team has won Super Bowl before, but it's usually the teams that get buys go to the Super Bowl, right? Because of that exhaustion from
Hmm.
playing that extra game
Yeah.
and the risk of injuries.
Being
And
on the road all the time and traveling rather than staying at home. Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't like the seventh NFL. I don't like the seventh team.
no,
I'd say either do 8 and no buys,
yeah,
or keep it as 6.
I don't know why. I don't know why they want to add it anyway. Just leave it at 6
Yeah,
because it doesn't really get them any extra.
it gives you one more playoff game.
Gives you one more time slot on a game on a day that already is going to have a game anyway.
Yeah,
It
you
doesn't
make
gain
more
you an
money.
extra week. If it gains you an extra week, then I totally understand it from a money perspective.
Yeah,
One game can't be that much different for
yeah, I
fun
understand.
for what the league cares about,
Mhm.
because that's the motivator from
I
the
think.
NFL.
Well, I think the NFL needs. Well, if I were the NFL, I would try to expand to 40 teams, then 8 playoff teams or 10 playoff
10
teams
playoff teams, yeah.
out of
12 playoff teams,
40.
something like that.
Only 24 playoff teams out of 40. That's too many, right? You'd want.
Yeah, 24 to 40 is too many. Yeah.
You'd probably want 20 out of 40 would be the max, I would guess. So you still
Right.
have 2.
Well, what is it right now? It's 10 out of 32, right? So like
It was 12 out of 32.
12 out of 32, yeah.
But now it's 14 out of 32 because it's 7 teams, 4 division winners plus 3 wild cards.
Yeah, I think that's too. I think
That's too many. I don't think you
that's
want
too high a percentage.
the NHL, the NBA is like half the teams, and NHL is about half the teams too. But I think you want to put more emphasis on the regular season, and I would do that. I think having fewer playoff teams is better. I don't think. Yeah, I think 4 is too few. I think 6 was just right.
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say if you had 40 teams in the league and you had 4 like 10 division teams, something like that, you'd want like 3 or 4 of them from each to come out, right? So, but you probably have more than that, though, right?
I'd say I think
5 division.
I think 16 teams out of 40 teams is good enough for the playoffs, or maybe 20 would be too many, I think. But I think that would be interesting. Yeah, I don't know how you do the 4. You could do 5. You would have if 40 teams. You could just add 1 team to each division and have 5 teams.
Yeah, I think that's what we'd have to do.
Divisions used to have 5 teams in them most.
Then just have 2 teams from each division come out.
Yeah, or
16, right? Yeah.
that'd be 16. That would be 16 out of 40 would be.
So that's less than half. That's less than half of the teams, which is what you want.
Yeah.
We just don't want teams with losing records to be in the.
Yeah, I think maybe you do wild cards. You do the winning team and then do the best next.
The next best, whatever. Yeah.
The top 4 division winners and then 4 wild cards, and then you could get 2 or 3 from a particularly hyper. But then the schedule would be weird because you would have, if you play double round robin in your division, that's 8 games in your division, and that leaves 8 games for the rest of the
like
conference.
5 and 3. I think you'd have to add games. I think too.
Or you play 4. Oh, like what they used to do, kind of 4 and 4. You would play 4 teams from the other division and 4 teams from the maybe if you had first place schedule play the top 4 teams, second place schedule play every team but the fourth place. Like if the first place team the next year would play. Let's say they win let's say the Chiefs win the AFC West and they're rotating and they're going to play the AFC North, and there are 5 teams in the AFC North. So the first place schedule would play the teams that finished first through fourth.
Yeah.
And not play the 5th place team. The second place team would play the teams that finished first, second, third, and 5th, not play the 4th place team, and so on. So the last place team wouldn't play the first place team in that division, but they play the bottom 4 of the previous year. And they could do that with the intra-conference teams.
Yeah, but you probably wouldn't play the other conference at all, though, if there's that many teams.
No, because
I think what I would like to see, this is it's totally up to me. I would do a 32-team league like it is right now. Add an 8-team sub-league. One team gets promoted up. One team gets demoted.
Relegation.
Like in relegation, like with
just one.
One or two, whatever. Yeah, just so that there's like a place for like the bad teams to like go get better, so they don't constantly stay in the AFC East and just allow New England to be good all the time. But then it does create like the need for realignment, though, if it's unless they just swap with whoever goes out. But
you could also have if you had like maybe you could do this with conferences, and instead of having divisions, you could have a round robin in your conference, and there would be a second division for the AFC, a second division for the NFC, and then you could have the lowest.
Right.
But I don't think relegation is going to work, because I think the owners and stuff you pay so much money, and also the country is so much bigger than England, which is tiny.
Yeah.
And there, you got 8 teams in London, 2 teams in every other big city. You can't. It's one of those things that I think it works well.
But it's so much more of a reward for a team that's in the lower league to come up.
Yeah.
And such a penalty to go down too, that it's a true motivator, and it should keep teams from tanking, because there'd be no reason. I mean, there would be a big penalty for tanking if you lose like that kind of revenue.
But you also don't have draft picks or things like that in those other leagues. They just sign whoever they want.
And we don't have to do that, though.
What it ends up being is like there's and those usually in Premier League, there are only like 6 teams that are ever really any good, and all the rest of them are just fighting for the scraps.
That's because they don't have like salary caps, though, either. Like, the top teams spend like 50 times what the bottom teams spend.
Yeah.
But they also get rewarded by having these huge deals. Yeah. And so, I don't know. I
understand. I think if it had been around for a long time, it would make sense. But I don't think imposing it after a while works, because like we've already built this $1 billion stadium. What are we gonna? We're gonna be the.
But the stadiums not necessarily owned by the teams even, but they. Yeah. And there are other revenue streams for stadiums too.
I think MLS might turn into a relegation league, because they're going to be a lot of those.
It should, and that's what they should be doing, because they keep adding teams to the league, and they're adding them pretty quick too. They don't seem to be messing around with like waiting for a few years. It's just like, nope, here's 6 more teams.